Hello, C2HR Con attendees. I'm Nick Dunlap, Vice President of Executive Compensation for Charter Communications and C2HR board member. Burnout continues to be a side effect of the pandemic, with a serious impact on organizations' performance and employees' well-being. We have an anti-burnout advocate with us to debunk burnout myths and share practical ways to manage and prevent burnout for yourself and your team. Hooky Wellness founder, Erayna Sargent, will share her expert insight with us today. You're invited to post questions and comments in the chat box throughout the session. Erayna, thank you for joining us today. The stage is yours.
Hi, I'm Erayna Sargent and really excited to talk to you all today about debunking burnout. We're going to be getting into how rethinking our approach is a key to beating burnout in the workplace. As I said, I am Erayna Sargent. I am the founder and chief anti-burnout champion at Hooky Wellness. Hooky Wellness is a personalized relief support system for burnout. I would say that I did not expect to find myself in this journey. A little bit about my background. I am originally from Detroit, so working hard, hustle culture is in my DNA. From the time I could have one job, I had multiple. It looks like I was well ahead of this polyworking trend that has started to grow over the past few years. So after getting my degrees and building a career in marketing and innovation across some of the world's biggest brands, about 5 years ago, I started to hit a point where working harder was no longer working. And for someone who was ingrained with the behavior of just keep working, work harder, keep pushing, it was very unfamiliar and somewhat overwhelming. As I started to deep dive into understanding what was going on with me, that is how I started to uncover the world of burnout and how rampant it was around the world. And this was before the pandemic. And so what started as a personal journey to help myself find relief really opened my eyes to how it was engulfing the professional workplace and really prompted me to pivot my career to launch Hooky Wellness to deep dive into the world of mental wellness, workplace behavior, employee experience, and really to bring about comprehensive support to help people when they need it the most. And so at Hooky Wellness over the past few years, I've had the honor of supporting workplace teams across organizations, including Google, Deloitte, Microsoft, Moet Hennessy, and really excited to give you an overview and a quick snapshot of some of the big things that's really important. And especially for individuals in an HR capacity, it is hard. I am not saying anything new or things that you're unfamiliar with. The thing about burnout is that it really takes a collective action. So I'm really excited to support you, the work that you do, and hopefully to give you some insights that can make it a little bit easier. So as I've said, I've worked with organizations, some of them scattered across the bottom. I also am a contributing writer to Well and Good, where I have a bi-monthly column where I talk about different aspects of working and wellness. So that's an ongoing resource even after our conversation. If you're looking for additional insight or perspective on this new way of working or the future of work that is now. So with that, as I said, we're going to talk about burnout. And the big thing with it, there's a couple big points that I like to point out. A study from Deloitte actually before the pandemic highlighted how 85% of millennials were experiencing burnout. Millennials are really, as you know, the core of our workforce and is going from around 30% to over 75% in the next few years. These are your mid-level leaders, those who I call people pillars, holding up and supporting those above them and below. When you look across the total workforce, it's numbers around 77% that I'm sure you are feeling every day. What's really interesting as you're seeing this research is that though people are starting to get a better understanding and awareness of it, we're still seeing around 37% of people are saying they're not taking any action. And for those who are starting to use some of their benefits like PTO, a recent study by Glassdoor actually reported 54% of people can't unplug. So those benefits and those resources and even taking time off is really continuing to be a challenge. And what's a really interesting dilemma that's going on for individuals like yourself, and I'm sure is making this a top priority, is People are often seeing that leaving a job is the number one solution to beating burnout. And when you compound that with the increased confidence in the job market, especially for those high performance workers, we have a very interesting situation. It creates a situation where we want to hold on to the most our high value employees, both from an organization, but employees actually don't want to leave either. And so how can we start to work together to bring about solutions to change this behavior and to really get ourselves back to bright, as I like to say it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're really going to talk about burnout and bring a really transparent and maybe even a little different perspective on how we can approach it. So I'm going to talk about 3 different areas of how we can debunk it. So number 1 is working from a perspective of mitigate versus eradicate. And as someone who is a new homeowner, this image of someone spraying the lawn for mosquitoes and other pests is very near and dear and commonplace for me. If you are a homeowner, if you've ever gone through this experience, you would know that this type of behavior happens on a regular cadence. It's an ongoing thing. It isn't a matter of one and done and it completely goes away. And that's a similar thing when it comes to burnout versus how often it's being talked about right now. But to take a step back and really ground you a little bit just on the basics. So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. It is caused by excessive and unmanaged stress. And on the left-hand side, what I have for you is the stress curve, because so often people are merging the two. And while stress and burnout are what I'd call cousins, they are not actually the same thing. Burnout is a result of untreated prolonged stress. And other things about burnout is that it is an intensifying cycle. It is not a one and done thing. It can absolutely come about. It is something that actually warns you that something's off with your situation. And unlike what a lot of people believe, it does not mean that you are a failure as an individual. That's a common misperception that goes with the way we've treated it in the past. Another big thing to know about burnout, because it is not the same as stress and not the same as a lot of other things that are discussed, is that it really focuses on impacts 3 dimensions. Those dimensions range from exhaustion, cynicism, and professional efficacy. Those are all things that affect you both in the workplace and at home. And just a caveat for this conversation, we are especially focusing on workplace burnout. Burnout is something that it can encompass different parts of your life. There's caregiver burnout, relationship burnout, parental burnout, but workplace burnout is the one that gets the most press. And it is especially an important aspect of all of our lives, as our workplace is a very important and large part of our calendars. So those exhaustion, cynicism, and professional efficacy can impact different parts of your being. And then last but not least, unlike what a lot of conversations have, this is actually a situation that occurs on 3 levels, or a result of 3 levels. It is a result of systemic behaviors, systems, structures, collective actions and ways of being or ways of working, and then individual behaviors to either mitigate or not, or to invite some of these ongoing well-being symptoms. So that's just a quick picture of burnout. And today we're just going to go what we can tackle in about 30 minutes. So I like to share as much information and really give you context and pictures so that you can immediately, hopefully, breathe a sigh of relief of one, either knowing you're not alone, whether you are dealing with this or your teams are dealing with this, as well as you have some greater clarity on what you can start doing about it and what it actually looks like. So when it gets into a matter of eradicating versus mitigating, when you look at an org of about 500 employees, the annual risk is $13 million from disengagement alone. Disengagement. This does not include the medical costs. This does not include the recruiting costs, the 2 to 3 times of costs it takes to replace someone. So burnout is a very real, rampant, and urgent issue. In the past, we've really been in a space of advocating it. And this is a matter of sweeping it under the rug, acting as though it doesn't exist. I actually call burnout hustle culture's dirty secret because for so long we were able to ignore it and say, this is an individual issue. Something is wrong with that person. That person can't cut it. Those are very common quotes and statements that I have heard from individuals that have either been in their own burnout situation or seen leaders in their organizations as they discuss individuals. So that has been what has happened in the past. And that's no surprise as you think about how our culture is based around hustle culture. You grind, you will sleep when you die. Those type of behaviors have created the situation where it gives the perception that if someone is dealing with burnout or other elevated levels of stress or other official mental health or medical conditions, they can't quite cut it. Now that the pandemic has really highlighted that burnout is here, and it's been here for a while, it was actually coined in the 1970s. And in 2019, the WHO deemed it an occupational phenomenon. But the pandemic really took the lid off, where this wildfire really grew or these glowing embers turned into a wildfire. So now we're in a place where the conversation is really about eradicating, getting rid of, eliminating burnout in your workplace. And so while it is exciting to see a lot of focus and discussion in this area, it can be disheartening to use language like that, because complete eradication of this in your organization is not really likely or possible, especially if you're in a place of high stress, high performance, tight deadlines, client needs, managing internal and external demands, client behavior, consumer behavior. So eradication turns into a stressor of its own, where if you are being tasked with eliminating burnout in your workplace, how does one do that? Taking it back to the metaphor that started that, how do you eliminate mosquitoes in a backyard? You don't really eliminate them completely because they're seasonal. They respond, they grow. It depends on the the situation at hand. And it really becomes a matter of mitigating. And mitigation is really where we need to think differently about the future of burnout relief and burnout management in organizations. How is it we can get that awareness so that we can put in more preventative measures, give people an understanding on what are some of those drivers and pressures, those things that can accelerate this, so that we can build in mitigating behavior, especially if you're dealing with a seasonal business where we know the pressure is coming. Those are burnout ready conditions. So if we can get into a place where it is managing or mitigating in more of a realistic perspective on what we can do about it, we can eliminate unnecessary and extra pressure and stress that comes with a goal of completely eradicating that. So a little bit more about what does mitigation look like? Mitigation, as I was saying, is proactive and transparent support. How do you get ahead of those things? How do you equip people with that awareness and understanding of what it could look like so that when they see those things coming, or their flags waving, as I like to say, they know exactly what to do? When you go to a beach and they raise different colored flags, that's when you know it's time to get out of the water, or it's getting choppy, or there might be something else in the water you don't want to be there with. How do we bring those type of indicators into the workplace and into our personal lives? One of the biggest things for me, as I have gone through this wonderful burnout cycle in my life, was getting an understanding of recognizing my warning flags so that I can change my behavior accordingly. And the thing is, every time I get a different warning flag, my life situation might be different. So I now know what type of behavior I can take and have the flexibility to put in those behaviors and those mitigation behaviors that can offset those symptoms as they come. Getting to mitigation also looks like optimistic realism versus toxic positivity. I'm all for a silver lining. I think that is a very important thing, but toxic positivity has actually been proven to create more harm. Toxic positivity is where it's a matter of someone dealing with challenges, and instead of recognizing and giving them space to process, it becomes a matter or a conversation of everything will be fine. Oh, no worries. It's great. We will absolutely figure that out. Optimistic realism is really what can help your team build trust and understanding, because sometimes that answer will be, we don't know yet, but we are investigating these 3 ways and we expect to have an understanding of what the solution will be by this date. Being transparent, being clear, and being realistic about the fact that there's a lot of unknowns or changing behaviors, it really helps to alleviate some of those unnecessary pressures. And when you think about that in a personal life, when you don't know and people don't say anything at all, that's where your brain starts to fill in the gaps and make up stories. So especially in a workplace and in seats that you have where you are leading organizations, you're leading teams, and that weight also falls on you, having some communication and bringing people along that journey, and especially if you're able to bring them in partnership, can really go a long way to mitigate some of those additional symptoms of stress and burnout. And then last but not least, mitigation is building out situational awareness. There were studies that show over 56% of people were saying that their organizations were not having conversations about burnout. And that alone creates this stigma and continues the stigma and the guilt. So if individuals on your team are experiencing it, if they don't have an outlet, if managers and the organizational leaders are never highlighting that this is a very real and urgent issue, then people feel that if something is wrong with them, that they have somehow failed in their role, that they are completely doing something wrong. While it may be that there are organizational structures, systems, policies, or ways of working that can actually be adjusted. Things as simple as not sending emails at night, or holding back from sending emails on the weekend, or as a manager of not sending emails when you're on vacation or taking calls when you're on vacation. Those type of things can really bring in some situational awareness of we need to do things differently, but also they may not have to be as drastic as some of these major overhauls of going automatically to 4-day work week, or making a definitive decision on working from home or going back to the office. This type of ongoing iteration allows your team and the individuals on your team to figure out what works for them, because every organization will be a little bit different. Every team might even be a little bit different. And so we are in the point where we are building the future of work. This is not a future state. And so once we understand that we are in it, we can have a big deep breath and say, all right, we're in the build phase, so let's build together. So that's a little bit about mitigation versus eradication. The next big one to debunk or to change our thinking on is collective is actually greater than individual. For the past, we've really taken an individual approach to solving burnout. And so I like to use this wonderful meme that I iterated on, where it highlights it's time to stop pointing fingers. And so from the sense of time until now, whether you're reading white papers or you're reading articles in Forbes or you're listening to the news, it's often a point of, well, organizations need to do this, or managers need to do this, or individuals aren't doing the behaviors they need to do, or they need to create boundaries. And while it is very important that all of the layers of an organization and of a team are doing their part, it is even more important we're doing it together, and it requires collective action. And especially as there's been a conversation around burnout, there's been a lot of finger pointing at the managers or those in the middle, as well as HR representatives, as well as our DEI support teams. And those teams already stressed, already tapped, are feeling extra weight. Managers are actually experiencing 3 times the burnout in the current day, because they're getting the pressure not only from their workplace objectives and their goals that they have to reach, but they're dealing with their personal lives, they're dealing with their work goals, and they're dealing with the teams as well. And so in a matter of no longer pointing fingers and really moving to a place of holding hands, we can share the weight, spread the weight, because the thing is, as you can see in the background, everything's not quite fine. And so it's a matter of how do we get to this place where we're working together versus against each other. So when it comes to the collective approach, it's a matter of creating a sense of shared accountability and bias for action. It's one thing to say we're doing something, but how are we taking those actions? As I said, simple things like changing your behavior of communication, expressing when things are urgent versus when they're not. Creating that bias for action, even taking those small steps, can get us a long way. Creating a common vocabulary and understanding. How are we creating the shared learning experiences so teams can level set together? And so we're not coming from different perspectives, but we're really sharing it, so then we're able to move forward. I am all about how do we eliminate unnecessary stress and pressure, and creating a common vocabulary and understanding is a big way. And within that, using those learning opportunities to create an approachable shared experience. Especially when it comes to hybrid working environments, it's challenging to build connection across teams. So how do we think differently around workshops? How do we think differently around team building? There's a lot of really exciting things going on, from using laughter for training to teams taking wellness retreats. I actually facilitated one a couple of months back where a team was using that for their team strategy session, and they went to a wellness retreat. How do we use that to incorporate it as a part of our learning? Because once again, we are building the future of work as we are sitting in today. And then number three, when it comes to debunking, a common thing about burnout is that it is common, but it is still unique. And so when you read the articles, a lot of the articles talk about how do you beat burnout? What do you do? Just take a nap, just take a day off. And I do have a company called Hooky Wellness. So trust, I greatly appreciate a day off and a Hooky day. But while those things are very important and are more helpful in a preventative measure, burnout can look a little bit different. Once again, it is a cycle. It has multiple stages, phases, and dimensions that I get into in my additional workshops and trainings. But the big thing to know is that while there are some common symptoms and signs, each experience of it is very unique. So when you look at it, it's really interesting. I like to say it's like a plant. And depending upon the plant that you have, whether you have a aloe plant, a succulent, or a fiddle leaf fig, if you are one of many that has decided to be a plant parent over the past few years, you may have learned that they all require a little bit different support. And as someone who is the owner of a fiddle leaf fig, I can tell you, it's not always that easy. So when it comes to burnout and you think about how it impacts your teams and yourself, you're like a plant as well. And sometimes you need water, sometimes you need fertilizer, sometimes it's a new pot, sometimes it's more humidity. But the thing is that it's very unique. And though universally they're all plants, or universally it's all a burnout situation, what you need to do about it is a little bit different. So what's really interesting in this dynamic and what's exciting is that there's been an influx in the amount of benefits and resources companies are shelling out. But what's interesting is we're continuing to see single digit utilization rates, especially when it comes to EAP programs. And as I said, I like a day off, but in 2018, we were seeing over 768 million unused vacation days. What in the world? And last year, or 2019, we were sitting on a PTO bomb where organizations, and you may be one yourself, were bracing themselves for people to just take all of their PTO at a time. But as I said, one of the things is people don't know what they need. They don't know how to use it. They don't know when to use it. They don't know what experts they need. They don't understand what resources, because often people don't recognize that burnout is showing up in their life into the later stages where there's no choice, where they're already overwhelmed by the symptoms, and where the only solution that looks right is to leave. That is not a sustainable practice. So how do we get to this place where it's more proactive, more ahead, giving people the support that they need and helping them figure out what that is? So moving to a place of more personalized support as it speaks to these unique phases of burnout. So having that range of options that supports them not only at work, but at home. That line was blurry always between work and home. And really now it does not exist. I think we can all attest to that. And so how do you support individuals both in the workplace from a matter of productivity, a matter of workplace management, a matter of communication and team connection, and really supporting them across the 6 drivers of burnout in the workplace, but also enabling them to be present at home, to use those times and to illustrate these behaviors and to create not only the future of work, but the future of culture. Really creating this place of approachable and clear support options. I can't tell you how many times people ask me, like, how do I find a therapist? I remember my experience when I was going into it, and even using my EAP, I was overwhelmed because there's all these filters of how you can search for them. But for me, I was starting with, I just need a therapist. And especially when you get to your employees of color, which I like to say burnout doesn't discriminate, but it does have its favorites. Individuals who are even more unfamiliar with mental health and wellness benefits are apprehensive. There's a lack of trust within organizations that this won't be deemed a ding on them and limit their career progression. But also, it's more work for them to even understand the impact of these things and how they can help them. So with it is, how can we get to a place where we create more of a simplified, frictionless experience so that people aren't bringing on more stress just to get the support that they need? So that's around the support, personalized support systems and what we can do to get from where we are today to where we want to go. So that was a really quick overview of some of the big things that we're debunking across burnout, some things to hopefully help you think a little bit differently on how we approach it and in your workplace. So one is going from a place of mitigation versus eradicating, mitigate versus eradicate. So with that is all about proactive and consistent behaviors. ongoing support to work with the situations at hand versus the perception that we can completely eliminate it, which can bring about unnecessary and untrue stress. The next step is all about collective versus individual action. So really, how can you reduce silos and bring clarity to roles and responsibilities? What is the role of a manager in your organization? What is the expectation of how they support? What's the expectation of senior leadership? And what is the role of individuals in this whole cycle? And really getting clear on what do we expect? How are our ways of working? How can we, as individuals help each other and help the organization reach its goals? Because it is a team and we all have shared objectives. And then last but not least is that it's common, but it's still unique. So providing a diversified support system while also simplifying the employee experience. As someone who has a background in consumer packaged goods, we all know that picture of a consumer at this grocery shelf where they're overwhelmed by the 42 options of bread. So while you want to give them the options of finding the things that fit their taste, how can you simplify and support their employee experience to help them find relief, and also to make use of those programs, systems, and initiatives that you've worked really hard to bring. So that was a quick view of burnout in the workplace and what we can start doing to think about it differently. As I said, I'm the founder and chief anti-burnout champion at Hooky Wellness. We are building a personalized burnout relief support system for today's workplace. It focuses and provides on an individual and a team support. We offer approachable, practical, and action-oriented approach. And then we recognize workplace demands. And so we really work in this space, I like to say, of work, wellness, and that gray area in between, with a heavy focus on those in high performance work environments. We have a range of offerings going from workshops, speaking engagements, courses, assessments, and anti-burnout toolkit and relief programs. We are currently recruiting. We have 4 slots for our back half for our burnout relief support system pilot. We have 4 more slots that are available, and we're looking for teams of 50 to 100 that are really looking to provide proactive preventative support that helps your employees feel like you're VIPs. So just a quick overview snapshot of one of our recent sessions with the Microsoft Windows team, and they were going through phase 1, and we're really excited to continuation of our support. Just some quick things of things that you can expect from your team. They would get understanding on increasing their knowledge on stress and burnout, identifying their symptoms, being more inspired to be proactive about their wellness benefits, and then also being more likely to use their benefits. So it's all about creating the support system that really drives utilization and complements those ongoing initiatives and programs, once again, that you've worked hard to bring forward. We know it is not easy, and it is definitely appreciated. So how do we get employees to understand it so that we can, once again, take the weight off across the board? So if you're interested in learning more, if this session was helpful, I would love to hear. So learn more, get your free burnout readiness assessment at hookywellness.com, or you can also shoot me a personal email at Erayna@hookywellness.com. And I'm on Instagram as well as Hooky. I am the Burnout Whisperer. So it was a pleasure to speak with you all. I'm really excited for our Q&A. And until we meet and talk again, work hard, self-care harder.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for spending part of your day with me. Really excited to keep the conversation going and hope that you found that information helpful. The next 10 minutes, we will spend answering some of the questions that have been coming in. Feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will do my best to work through them and address them all. So one of the first questions that came through was, what kind of habits and boundaries should I adopt to keep burnout away? And my take with that question is really to keep burnout away from a personal standpoint. When it comes to some of those habits and behaviors, the biggest things that I talk about when it comes to burnout is managing yourself across what are the 4 pillars of mental wellness. That's the space of growth, rest, play, and community. The thing about burnout is that it is multidimensional. And so we often minimize how much work actually does go in on the daily by often saying all you have to do is, or just do this one thing. So I like to break it down into a couple simple key parts, which having a background in innovation and using an employee and design centric approach, you probably get an understanding of frameworks. But within the growth pillar, it's a matter of how are you managing and maintaining your personal development and mental health. So quick overview, some of the modalities that fall into that is therapy, coaching, introspection, journaling. So making sure that you're getting pieces of that where you are having the space for self-reflection and really understanding and recognizing how you may be feeling physically, mentally, and emotionally, that all are things in the growth pillars. So finding some behaviors that can give you that introspection is one of the first steps. Within the rest pillar, you need to let your brain breathe, especially with the work that you're doing. It is all consuming. So within the rest pillar, those are things from yoga, meditation, mindfulness, acupuncture, things that can give you rest, relaxation, and allow for rejuvenation. You are working hard. And this is where the common conversation about refilling your cup comes in. It is much needed. Play is something that's overlooked. That's one of the other key pillars that is spoken to really helping with creativity, flow, getting rid of some of the symptoms of cognitive fog, which are real. So playing from a game standpoint, physical activity, those are the types of things that you should maintain and keep a part of your life on an ongoing basis. And then last but not least is the matter of the community pillar. You're not in this alone. You don't stay out of it alone. And so making sure you're surrounding yourself by family, friends, and those who care about you is a really important thing. So once again, those four very, very quick pillars of growth, rest, play, and community are some of those everyday habits. Boundaries from a matter of making sure that you create a work day that ends. That is one of the fundamental first things to do. What that means to you is to understand what is your turnoff point and what actions are you going to take to ensure that you do it. So is it a reminder in your calendar? Is it using someone in your household to be an accountability partner? Is it by maintaining a separation of somewhat of space within your household if you are working from home or hybrid, creating that separation? Those are two of the first and biggest boundaries you can do to start to keep burnout at bay, because those things are illustrative of a lot bigger habits and changes coming. So that was a quick jump. The next one that came in is very real about if you're already dealing with burnout, what's a first step in digging out? The foundational thing to do within burnout and to really get out of whichever phase or stage that you might be in is self-awareness. Self-awareness is a lot more dynamic and challenging than many people think. There was actually a study by Tasha Eurich that spoke to how 95% of people think that they're self-aware, but in reality, it's only 10 to 15%. And so if you are feeling like you are in a burnout rut, one of the most impactful things you can do is to stop, sit, and actually start journaling, understanding how do I feel? How do I feel mentally, emotionally, and physically? And to pay attention to if it is a fluke or if it is an ongoing trend. One of the sneakiest things about burnout is that in the earlier stages, people are saying, I'm fine, or we are often ready to dismiss or discount the stress because everyone deals with stress. But if you think back to that curve, it very much is a downslope, and it is a slippery downslope. So very often you can easily say, oh, it's fine, and you look up and it's not. And so how can you create those habits and behaviors? On hookywellness.com, we actually have Burnout Bingo. You take a quick quiz that can help you understand where you might be in the burnout cycle. And then Burnout Bingo is a very easy tool that you can start to keep track of how you're feeling. And it often can give you language so that if you're saying, I feel off, you now know a deeper level of what that might mean. And then having that language empowers you to have conversations with the support system that you might already have into place. So in step one of digging out is really start assessing how you're feeling and being honest with yourself about that result. Question number 3, in my research, have I found a difference in burnout rate for people working from home and working in the office? That is a great question. And so I will transparently say, I don't know the stat of that, but my thoughts and why I've not been as enthused to read those is that any data that speaks to burnout in the present day or over the past 2 years is really skewed because the dynamics and the drivers and accelerators of burnout are at an all-time high. And so if we wanted to compare working from home or working in the office, the data is a little skewed in the present time. What we do know is that burnout was an issue before the pandemic and everyone was working from home. Study by Deloitte, as I referenced earlier, 77% of professionals were dealing with burnout. Burnout was coined in the 70s. It was occupational phenomenon in 2019. So working from home creates different dynamics and can create a more accelerating situation that can call for burnout, but it is not the only thing that can create it. And so what we have seen as people have shifted to working from home, they're working longer hours. Workload is one of the number one known drivers of burnout in the workplace. So there's no surprise that we're seeing an ongoing acceleration as well as an elongation of what was already existing. Question 4. Oh, this is a good one. With the Great Resignation, many of us are losing employees and having to take on extra work. That is real. The work does not go away. If we do take PTO, we almost have to work so you don't get too far behind with the action items and the emails, which then can create burnout. We love this cycle. When we don't have options like this, how do we prevent burnout? Because it seems like a never-ending thing. That is very real. And I have to be honest, the work isn't going to magically disappear. And so when we get into the situation, which is a very real situation that is not going away because of the wonderful cycle where we are right now, it's how do we actually work differently? So we are in a situation where we're beyond a matter of pure prevention. We are in the matter of truly managing and flying this plane while we're rebuilding it. And so when it comes to a matter of losing employees and needing to take that work, because it does trickle down, it becomes ever so important to ensure the energy and effort that you are extending are focused on the right things. In the positions that you are as leaders, you have the ability to influence change. And I do recognize that things sound easier said than done, but these are times where it calls for, are these things necessary? Is this important? Is this fire drill a true thing, or are we overcomplicating it? And so it takes a second and thinking about the tasks that are being handed down, reflecting on your overall objectives for the year, if things need to shift, if there's a new approach of how work is being done, might be needed to be deployed in your organization. Is there a way of leveraging contractors that might have been with your organization for years or have experience, or bringing in past employees and a contractor capability to carry some of the weight for a short period of time? As we know, we are in the world of polywork. So potentially there's an opportunity that instead of looking at it as an enemy of our workforce, maybe there's an opportunity within it for us to restructure how we're doing work, at least temporarily. So the big thing for that is to make sure that that extra weight is real weight and is necessary. Eliminating unnecessary stress and pressure is the key to help create the space so you can tackle and create new systems, structures, and policies. This stuff isn't going to happen overnight, and I hope that this is helpful. But when it comes to how do you deal with PTO when you're managing short, you have to build in that time, because we cannot afford for you to burn out, because that just takes it to a whole nother level. So from a realistic of how do you take a break, are there ways that you can use your workday to give you little bouts of relief? It sounds simple, but the whole idea of taking a walk or doing your meetings while taking walks or creating a slightly shorter or earlier day, those type of things can create little bouts of extended bandwidth. When it comes to PTO, if you are taking a PTO day, or try to plan it in advance so that it's not a matter of, oh, I have these projects or these things coming up I didn't get a chance to. How can you put it on your calendar in advance so it's something you can look forward to and you work around? So we are wrapping up on time. I tried to get through as much as I could at this point in time. For additional support, and especially questions about the supervisor direct report relationship, that is a much meatier conversation that I am excited and ready to have. If you have any other questions, please contact me at info@hookywellness.com. Thank you so much for your time and for being a part of today. And I wish you luck in the rest of this experience and have a great break.